Hi, Jim here, just dropping in before this week's episode to tell you about my latest movie, The Apocalypse Box. It's a horror film and I'd love for you to check it out. If you go to apocalypsebox.co.uk, you can find all the links on where you can watch the movie. Right, let's get on with this week's episode. Hi, Jim here, and you're listening to the Honest Filmmaker podcast, career advice from people in the business. This week I'm speaking to horror influencer Chris Mayo. Chris is also known as Big Fat Cult on TikTok and Instagram, and reviews and talks about the latest horror movies and movies out on release. Chris also attended this year's Fright Fest film festival, so I got him to give me a rundown of some of the films he enjoyed from that festival. He also gave me some tips for posting on social media, told me a little bit about how he got started and his move into becoming an influencer. We talked about some of the trends in horror movies, and he also told me his tips for posting on social media and how to reach your audience. Enjoy. So first of all, tell me a little bit about yourself. Did you study at uni? Sort of how did you get into the business?
So I didn't go to uni. I did studied media and performing arts at college in Gosport in Hampshire, so sort of nearish to Portsmouth. And then actually started my career as a comedian. Wanted to be an actor initially, and then kind of fell into comedy, and then through that managed to get work sort of as an actor, and then as with all these things, being a freelancer, spent a lot of time taking other freelance jobs and other creative jobs. So just kind of found my way working in kind of every aspect of the industry in some sort of fashion. And then in the last couple of years have got more into the film side, either talking about films, writing films, and creative content, and then have also gone back into acting. So a very kind of long-winded way of saying just got thrown in at the deep end and have been winging it ever since.
Yes, that sounds like a lot of us. So Big Fat Cult is your handle, and there's TikTok, Instagram, and it's very much that kind of stuff seems to be mainly horror, would you say, or is it a mix?
It is definitely a mix, but my gravitation is towards horror, so that has always been my love and passion for film, or kind of darker stories, whether that be dark comedy or horror comedy or thrillers. But I tend to gravitate towards the kind of that side of film and TV. But I do still watch wholesome comedies and animations from time to time. You know, you need a little reset in between all these weird and wonderful films. So I do cover pretty much everything. But the best response and the best kind of passion for me comes from that side of filmmaking. Yeah.
The darker stuff. So not to get too psychological here, why is that? What's because I'm the same, but why is it like that for you?
I grew up kind of watching darker comedies like The League of Gentlemen and stuff by Chris Morris like Brass Eye, and stuff that is kind of uncomfortable comedy, I think you'd probably say. And then from that, kind of learning about what inspired them, it was always classic horror, and it was kind of the weirder, more wonderful side of cinema. So having kind of grown up with those things, I then went to watch all the stuff that inspired them, and that in turn inspired me. And then I kind of just gravitated towards that going forward. So I've always liked comedy, but I kind of like the quirkier side of comedy. So that kind of naturally tends to lead into more kind of horrific stuff, I suppose, comedy and tragedy. So no particular reason, no like disastrous events in my life that have led me to sort of, dwell in the darkness or anything. I'm quite a chipper, light-hearted person in day-to-day life, I'd like to think. But
yes.
It's just something about that kind of uncomfortableness and that fear. I'm a bit of an adrenaline junkie as well. I love theme parks and stuff like that, so was always drawn to like fake fear, I suppose, like kind of fear in a controlled environment. So kind of stuff that is rooted in reality in some respect, but also an escape from reality, I would say.
Yeah. And talking about that chipper personality, so obviously take me back to you're doing all these other things, acting jobs, this and that, and you go, right, okay, I'm going to start doing TikTok, I'm going to start doing Instagram. And I know, even when I first started this podcast, putting yourself in front of a camera and then uploading it, if you're not a performer, and I'm not a performer or a comedian, that can be quite tough, confidence wise. Did you ever struggle with that, or were you like, right, I'm doing it straight away, no problem?
Well, there's definitely some that I think anyone would be lying if they said they had no self-doubt or no issues with self-confidence. I'm sure everyone does to some extent, and I think people either overcompensate for that by, kind of projecting this persona that they want people to see them as, or or they're just natural performers and enjoy that side of things. But I think there's always like some willingness to please or to entertain, or so there's always like a kind of underlying confidence thing, whether that be overconfidence or wanting to give off that impression. So I think because I started as a comedian, from pretty much the age of 18, I was used to dealing with hecklers and dealing with like live trolling, basically. So there's nothing more instant feedback wise than doing a comedy gig and someone telling you immediately what they think of you. So I was kind of set up for that world, I think, sort of performing a version of me to an audience. I'm definitely not a massively confident person in my day-to-day life. Like, I'm not someone who makes themselves known in a room. But I enjoy sharing my passions and my my kind of story with people, whether that be through comedy or acting or talking about films and pop culture. So there was always a little bit of a doubt, but also I knew that I was able to kind of do that and knew that I could be entertaining in some form to some group of people as myself, or a version of myself. So and also I think when you're passionate about something, there's always going to be an audience that enjoy you for however many people don't like that version of you. There's always going to be an audience that go, oh, well, this person really likes that thing that I like. So there is that kind of, you gravitate towards people like that, I think, that like your things to some extent. But as it's gone on, I've definitely learned about versions of myself that come across well on camera. Also having done quite a lot of interviews and things now, being slightly more animated and trying to, because if I just sat here like, oh yeah, so I films and like that's probably what's going on in my brain, but it's it's just a way of conveying what excites you, I think, and what you want people to be excited about as well. Like sometimes people say, oh, you hype up films too much, or you do this too much, and I'm like, well, I want to, for the people that like those things, I want to share that passion with people. And you want to see people that are excited about things, I think, when you're on social media. So, but you also have to know when to rein it in as well. You don't want to be unbearable.
Absolutely. And equally, no one wants to watch the TikTok channel of someone going, it was all right.
Yeah, exactly.
It was okay. Yeah, you might as well watch it. It was all right. Yeah, it's interesting what you say about being kind of a positive, because I've heard someone describe it before as, that stuff, Barocca, you put it in your drink,
yes.
It gives you energy. Yeah. It's like an orange pill. It's like being that version of yourself on camera, but not being this kind of over-egged, wacky version of yourself that's going to make people cringe. So then, and again, that's for a filmmaker, that can be tough when you're trying to talk about your project. The last thing you want to do is come across as kind of bored and indifferent, when really inside you're trying to think of what to say. Have you got any tips for that? How to be confident on camera?
I would say do it lots, as in whether that's just recording yourself, like, reading a script. I've got a teleprompter app that I use on my phone for my longer reviews. Some stuff is off the cuff, but in fact, when I started, it was all off the cuff. But I found I was editing so many ums and ahs and kind of thoughts that it was taking me 2 to 3 hours to edit a kind of slick video. Whereas now I, spend half an hour writing a tight script, and then I'll go off on little tangents about things as they kind of come up in my head. So I think just being confident with the idea of talking into a camera, talking to other people that have kind of, like doing these kind of things, and I interview filmmakers as well, and other people in the industry. So kind of having that kind of muscle memory, I suppose, or that kind of practice is really helpful, because you're not kind of you're not performing, but you are presenting a kind of hopefully clearly spoken version of yourself. And obviously we all have mannerisms and things like that. And when I watched my earlier videos back, I go, oh, I say like too much, or I and ah too much. So I try and have a little pause and think about what I'm saying. And there was always that, especially with comedy, there was always the pressure to not stop talking. But actually, when I've listened to some of my favorite interviews with people, they are just talking as themselves, and they're relaxed and they're comfortable. And I think it is getting over that perception of how people are seeing you or hearing you, and just, being yourself and being comfortable, but allowing yourself time to breathe and time to think, and not worrying about being the most entertaining person or the funniest person or whatever. So yeah, practice, and I think with that comes confidence and experience as well.
Yeah, definitely. And just to reiterate, and I'm sure my kids are sick to death of me saying this, but the like thing, it's an epidemic.
It is.
And you have to stop yourself, because it's easy. Or the other one is people end a sentence, they go, and the film was really good, really enjoyed making it, and yeah. You can't edit that. There's nothing you can do with that.
It's really hard when you're interviewing filmmakers and actors, and there is just that. Then it was, we had a really good time, and yep. And you kind of go, okay, and then you feel the need to kind of ramp the energy back up, because you want people to feel comfortable, but also there is that certain media training that some actors and writers and directors have, that they feel like they have to give very concise answers, and sometimes you do in the space of a 5-minute interview or something. But yeah, it's nice to feel like you're talking to someone who's relaxed and wants to be there as well.
So talking about another thing that filmmakers can struggle with is the whole social media itself. So talk to me about, have you got any tips for things like TikTok, things like Instagram? What are you posting every single day? What's the magic formula so we can all use it?
Well, if you sign up to my course, which is £899 for 12 sessions. No, I think it is a really boring answer, but persistency, is that a word?
It is now.
Persistence and consistency. Being consistent, being genuine, and just putting the work in for a prolonged period of time. So I think I started just because I wanted to put a video out. I just wanted to review a film that I'd seen at the time. I didn't have any end goal about being a TikTok person or an Instagram person or anything like that. I just was like, I want to talk about this film that I saw. I think it will be, interesting, because I went to a preview of a film that not many people had seen at that point. So I was like, oh, it'd probably be, relatively interesting. Talk about it. And then that video did quite well. And I thought, oh, okay, I'll try and, capitalize on that and find another kind of niche film that I could talk about. So I did a list of a few strange films that I'd seen and posted that, and that did really well as well. And then I, got a bunch of people messaging me saying, oh, I love those kind of films. Not many people talk about cult movies, or, oh yeah, really, So then just did a few more of those over the period of a couple of weeks, and some did really well, some didn't do well at all, but I just kept on going. Did a bit of research, into social media tactics, with posting certain times a day or posting multiple times in a week. Trends I've never found particularly helpful if you're talking in a niche. Like, I think if you're someone who dances and there's trending dances, great. If you're a singer and you're, doing trending songs or music or little clips, then that's really useful. But I think if you're someone who talks about films, then, you want to talk about the latest releases, or you want to talk about films that are going to get people excited, or controversial films, or something where you can kind of hook people in, but have your own spin on it. And because I came from a comedy background, I was like, I could be a slightly sarcastic person talking about film. So I never set out to be a standard critic or a reviewer. I just thought I'm going to talk about films in quite a frank way, and hopefully people will like that. And I think that's what people have latched onto, the kind of genuine but slightly tongue-in-cheek, slightly sarcastic kind of way of talking, and that suits what I do. But some people are, really into extreme cinema, or some people are really into Marvel or, world cinema and stuff like that. So I'm obviously just talking about filmmaking there, but I think any niche is good. Perfecting the editing side of things as well. I found that just getting straight to the point of a video has really done well for me. Spent a lot of time going, hey, so today I'm going to be talking about this, and like people just go, But if you just start with, oh my God, this thing I just saw was horrendous, then people go, oh, okay, I'll stay for a few more seconds. So I think that hook, the editing, something like lighting, good sound, very basic things, but things that since I've kind of developed my kind of brand or persona or whatever you want to call it, all of those things have kind of brought me bigger and better opportunities. So looking like you know what you're doing, but also giving the care to the content in terms of the quality of how it actually looks and sounds as well.
I do think you should write a book called Persistence, Big Fat Cults, Guide to Social Media.
A guide to social media, winging it. Yeah.
Yes, winging it. So obviously you watch a lot of films, you watch a lot of horror films. Now thinking about it from the audience's perspective, micro budget, low budget, what are you looking for when you get sent a screener? What gets the taste buds going?
Something that surprises me, something that shows like a bit of fearless risk taking. I love. Like some of my favorite films I've seen over the last few years have been completely like out there and just completely bonkers, and stuff that you wouldn't expect people could do on a modest budget, or people that take a risk and don't necessarily conform to the expectations of what a horror movie should be or what a thriller should be, or things that surprise me, things that change what they are halfway through and suddenly are something completely different. Whether that's a big studio film or like tiny shot on an iPhone in someone's flat, seeing that ambition and that passion and the love for the filmmaking, not just obviously everyone wants to make a living, everyone wants to make money, everyone wants to get good recognition and have big stars and all this stuff, and all those elements are important, but it's the excitement of the idea and originality and a unique vision, I think, that kind of makes me sit up and go, oh wow, that's they're really doing something different there. And just fighting against expectations, because it is incredibly hard to get work made, even harder if it's something weird and against the grain. So when that stuff actually breaks through and does well, then that's like a real as an actor and as someone who writes and as someone who watches lots of stuff, it's really exciting to see people take those risks and get them made. So yeah, that kind of thing.
So then the reverse, you see a lot of stuff. I'm sure you see a lot of bad stuff, and you're not allowed to say the opposite of what you just said. So what have you seen? What have you seen a lot of coming through that you're just like, oh, enough with that already? Particularly in horror.
I know it's obvious, but I'm not a fan of lots of CGI. That takes me out of a film. I think it definitely has its place, particularly in bigger budget stuff where you just need to fill all that space and that time with things that will wow people. But I think for horror, less is often more. And I think a lot of bigger studio horror stuff really just bombards you with jump scares, over the top sound design, very, the production is ahead of the actual script and the characters, stories that are character driven, that are based in reality or even just based in human emotion, and then the horror develops from that, I find much more interesting than a CGI monster popping out of a cupboard every couple of minutes. It's And don't get me wrong, there are absolutely films that have done that recently and have been very good fun. But the films that stick with me and kind of get under my skin and that I think about and talk about are things that are, character-driven stories, very good dialogue, or stylistically very interesting, and that do something, again, kind of against convention or against the norm. So yeah, just the formulaic kind of paint by numbers stuff. It's been done so many times, and that's quite often the case with remakes as well. Like there's been some really interesting remakes and some really cool kind of retellings of stories. Like I really liked The First Omen. I thought that was fantastic. But then there have also been, obvious cash cows or obvious, box office focused films, which kind of just make me go, I don't buy into the world of the story because you can see the kind of fakeness to it or what it thinks the audience want to see.
And it's interesting because when you come to sell a film, you're encouraged to make films that are of that cookie cutter type, because those salespeople know exactly what to do with it, and they go, "Oh yeah, UFO. People love UFOs. It's a UFO movie." And even when you're talking about making a film, I've spoken to sales and distribution, and it is all, "Oh yeah, it's a bit like this thing. We'll have another one of them that did well." So you're definitely not encouraged to do anything original. So that is a bit of a battle. So you've written a book, The Ultimate Horror Movie Journal, which is on Amazon. Tell me about that, and how did that come about?
That was just a bit of fun, really, to go alongside because for a couple of years, I had a podcast, the Big Fat Cult Movie Podcast, and then I kind of put that to one side because, as I'm sure, as you know, recording regular episodes, editing, getting stuff out there, after a while, you just go, "Oh my God, I just need to not do this for a little bit of time." And there's so many podcasts and there's so many things out there that it can get to a point where you're like, "Oh, I just can't do it for a period of time." So I wanted to have a little project that people could get involved with. So I kind of set up Big Fat Cult as a brand. So it wasn't just the podcast, it was the online stuff and the community-based stuff where, I can engage with people. And then, just was doing loads of the online, like Letterboxd I love, and, reading reviews online, but thought, there is still a kind of market for, people are into journaling and writing and wanting to be creative with, with writing as well. So I just made this little horror journal that people can take with them. So when they're going to festivals or when they're, watching stuff online, they can just, make a note of all their watches. And it's just a nice little thing to have that I think everything is so digital now that it's nice to have stuff that exists in the real world as well. So but yeah, that was no get rich quick scheme. That was just I just want to put something out there, and I think a few people will find it fun. So every now and then I get these. I'm someone who just has like 800 ideas all at once, and I'll probably pick 4 a year and go, right, I'm going to do that now, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to try and get that made. And so that was another one of my projects that's out there now.
Harebrained schemes, but it's it's out there, so people can download it. So then the other thing I was thinking, which is a kind of a treadmill I'm on at the moment, and I know a lot of filmmakers struggle with this. There's a ton of websites out there, ton of influencers, ton of horror sites, magazines, blah 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 blah. If you're trying to publicize your project, what would be your tips for that? What would be your tips for getting to someone like you? What would be your tips for getting exposure at a festival? Is there anything you can offer us there?
Like with all things, just asking is the best way to start. Like I think I got everything early on from just sending loads and loads of emails to everyone I could think of. Festival contacts, film PR companies, directly to filmmakers, directly to other content creators, whether it's Instagram DM or emails, or looking for emails in people's bios, going through agents, just sort of sending out all my stuff and just saying, this is what I do. I'd really love to do more of it. Is there a way we can work together? And in terms of promoting stuff, like working with I hate the word influencer, but it's what people know. Content creator as well. There's no good way of saying I make stuff. Look at me. But that, whether you're a content creator or an influencer, I think unless you have tens of millions of followers, people genuinely and generally like to work with other people. Like I do a lot of promotion for indie films, and I set my rates for that like really, really low. I have like an indie rate, and I just say, if you're an indie filmmaker, I'll put a video on my TikTok and my Instagram. I'll share it, and hopefully people that like the stuff that you're making will see it, because I have a very focused audience. And I have a very good reach. I don't have millions of followers, but my accounts do reach millions of people. So I think filmmakers appreciate that side of things, rather than maybe paying a PR agent thousands of pounds to get a few radio interviews or whatever. So I think the landscape is changing a bit, that you can reach millions of people much more affordably now, and much more focused than doing all the local radios or local newspapers or film magazines and stuff, which I think are all very useful, but I think they are expensive resources. So in terms of me, like I will reply to every email and message, or certainly try to, and I'm happy to offer little bits of advice to people, and I think it's much less a closed book now than it was quite a long time ago as well. It'd be very hard to get an email address of a director or a PR person, or there was that kind of status thing, where I think that's a little bit less now as well, because of film festivals. You can just go there and you can meet people, and you can bump into filmmakers and producers, and so I would say if you're an early stage filmmaker, then definitely go to those things as a punter, like just be in the world of those things and see how they work. Contact the organizers, and and also see if there's any way of getting your short shown at a festival or anything local that's going on. So just lots and lots of emailing, and not being afraid to ask, and be proud of what you do and confident of what you do. The worst people can say is no or not reply, and then you just go on to the next person. But chances are most people will at least acknowledge you, or put you in their head somewhere for later down the line.
Absolutely. And one thing I would add to that, which I've discovered recently, because obviously I'm sending emails out, is the follow-up actually is a good. So sending that first email, but do send a follow-up just to check they got it, because it's so easy these days. You get an email, you go, yeah, I'll deal with that later, or a message, and you just forget about it. So the follow-up is important. Talking about film festivals, you've just got back from Fright Fest. So tell me about Fright Fest this year, and tell me what were some of your highlights.
So for people who don't know, Fright Fest is one of the biggest genre film festivals in the world, and certainly the biggest in the UK in terms of horror, thriller, sci-fi, fantasy. So filmmakers from all around the world, whether they're first-time filmmakers or very established filmmakers, will submit their films to the festival. And then I think this year there were 69 films, something like that, 60 to 70 films, plus short film showcase and other little bits and pieces, events and things going on. So I was there as a press person this year, so I got to see a lot of the films in the lead up to the festival on screeners, and then saw a bunch at the actual festival itself, and then did a bunch of interviews with filmmakers. So if you're a horror fan or a genre fan, or even just a filmmaker looking to get experience at the festival, that's a great way of just it's in central London for 5 days every summer, and then they have a Halloween one in November, or the beginning of November, and then one in Glasgow in March as well. And you'll see absolutely every end of the scale, from very, very rough around the edges stuff shot for no money to huge films like The Substance, which was the closing film, which is one of the biggest films at Cannes, and comes out this month actually, and Strange Darling, which did really, really well, and films that are big on the festival circuit and then become kind of breakout successes. But so some of the some of the smaller stuff I saw. A film called A Desert was really, really good. It's like a road movie about a photographer that suddenly becomes something else and much more intense. That was very, very inventive. Not from a filmmaker that I'd heard of before, Joshua Erkman, and with a cast I mostly didn't know, but just, again, it was a great story, great characters, great cinematography, and just, yeah, completely blew me away. A film called Dead Male, which is playing at Grimfest next month and then some other festivals. That was a very quirky film about someone who is kidnapped after he goes into business with someone who is obsessed with synthesizers, like the most unlikely of kind of joining of worlds. A very sort of analog-y style, like 80s set film, which was really interesting and kind of brought a very unique take on the kind of captor kidnapping kind of story, and it was quite darkly funny as well. What else did I see? Saw so many films. Bookworm, which was a really nice kind of comedy fantasy film with Elijah Wood as a sort of failed magician finding himself. A nice sort of another road movie. And then Broken Bird, which was the opening film, Joanne Mitchell's debut feature. And she's someone that's been working in shorts for 15 years and suddenly got the money to create her first feature. And it was the opening film at Fright Fest in front of 800 people. So got to interview her, and, you know, she was, you know, over the moon and created a really, really good film. So just loads of interesting stuff that you probably wouldn't get to see in the cinema, and that may just go to streaming or may have a, you know, very limited cinema release. But those little gems where you go, oh, that's what I'm really interested in. And now those filmmakers are, you know, be very keen to see what they do next. And they're now on my radar. So people that I'm kind of excited to know in the early stages of their career or the more obscure areas of their career.
Fab. Well, I would definitely put links to those filmmakers and films in the description on this episode. So what I was going to ask you about was, this is what I would class as my fun questions, he says. It's
finally,
always dangerous.
Finally, my God.
Finally, here he goes with the fun. This is either going to be a really easy question or a really tough question. What's the best horror movie ever made?
That is a tough question. Evil. I don't know if there is a best horror film ever made, but I would say the one that, or maybe like the two or three that have kind of stood the test of time and influenced so many films. The obvious ones like The Exorcist, The Shining, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, those are the three classics that I think everybody will have heard of in some respect, or everybody would have seen a reference to, or everyone will know the throwing up pea soup scene or the head spinning scene or the, you know, bloke with the chainsaw scene. You know, like, not people that don't even follow horror will go, oh yeah, I know that. And I think those kind of ripples through pop culture are kind of testament to how influential those films are and how referential they are in modern cinema as well. You go, oh, that's a nod to The Exorcist, or that's a tongue-in-cheek moment from The Shining, or, you know, something like that. And I think the way that they're made and the way they're constructed as well still definitely crop up in a lot of films. I would say the Blair Witch Project, while it's not my favourite film, I can't think of many films that have been referenced quite so much or used quite so much for techniques in found footage, and, you know, the whole boom of kind of low budget independent films that have suddenly become massive successes. So I think from a filmmaking point of view, something like the Blair Witch Project is really, really impressive and interesting, even if, you know, on paper it's not the most exciting film. And something modern like Hereditary is one of the best for me. I know this is a very divisive thing. People love to hate that film. But again, because it's divisive, because people go, oh, it's not a proper horror film, it's got too much talking and drama and trauma in it, you know. I love that took risks and is 3 different films in one, and, you know, throws all these different ideas at you, but does it in a completely interesting and very scary way, and uses very, very good actors in very serious roles and then adds all the layers of horror on top of it. If you take away all the scary sounds and all the disturbing visuals from Hereditary, it's a sad story about, a family falling apart, and that could just as easily be a drama. But I think films like that do something more are what really excite me. So I think I can't think of a modern film really that has been more long lasting in pop culture. That's my very long-winded answer of saying I don't know.
I don't know. No, that's
but
fine.
The Exorcist and Hereditary, the two that immediately pop into my head.
Pop into your head. Hereditary, absolutely love it, and I still can't figure out why it's so scary. It just is. It just creeps me out. And like you say, Tony Collette in that should have got showered with awards because it's so good. Such a good movie. What I was going to pick up on there was, so I'm not going to make an assumption about your age, but but I wonder whether on TikTok you ever put anything up that might be considered older, like even Hereditary. Someone might be like, "Oh, that's an older film," and you're to Exorcist. You're talking about what, 70s, 60s, 70s. Do you often are you ever surprised that people haven't heard of stuff and you're like, this is a classic? Why haven't you seen this?
I think there is also the perception that TikTok is a young person's game, and it certainly feels like that at times. I've learnt so much about singers in the charts over the last few years that I had no clue about, and suddenly have to be switched on to. But I don't even know if the charts is a thing anymore. That's how old I am. But I'd say like TikTok helps you find your audience. So initially, the algorithm will push you to very, very specific audiences who will probably get that very niche reference to a film from the 60s. And then if that does well, it will take it out to a wider film audience, and then it will take it out to people that like popular culture audience. So I find that in those initial stages, you reach the people that you want to reach, and then you reach the people that you might want to reach, and then you reach the people that you probably shouldn't reach, but that TikTok thinks will do well. And then that's when you get all the like, well, what's this? This film is rubbish. Oh, you don't know what you're talking about. So you kind of don't want to have those massive viral videos too often, because you end up just reaching people that every viral video goes to. Obviously it's nice because then you get a broader load of followers and things, but you do suddenly notice as a video gets more successful that the audience is much broader and therefore has much stronger opinions about whether or not something is good, or what you're wearing, or what you talk like, or all those things. So so there is that, but I think it's quite good initially at giving you the audience that you're trying to reach, and boring stuff like hashtags and titles and things. Like if I do a video saying my favorite videos from the 80s, then most people that have no interest are just gonna immediately see a number before 2010 and scroll on.
Switch it off.
But yeah, I've been surprised with people that have because there are teenagers and there are people in their 20s that are real hardcore film fans or filmmakers. But yeah, also there's people that have never heard of anything before 2005. So that always hurts a little bit.
Yeah, it does. It hurts. Well, the film I just made with the students, the films I would mention, they'd go, "Oh no, I've not heard of that one." And I think you posted on your wall about something like Old Boy or any of those, Sympathy for Lady Vengeance, those kind of films. You're just like, we haven't even heard of that. What's the matter with you? And you're in a film course. So my next fun question is, what for you is the most disturbing scene in a movie? Doesn't have to be a horror movie, but most disturbing scene in a movie.
The film I think that made me like absolutely break down. Like I'd like to think I'm quite an emotional person, like emotionally in tune, but every now and then something will just completely like uncontrollably be taken over with emotion. And Dancer in the Dark, Lars von Trier's film with Björk, is sort of a quirky musical to start with, and then it's a really, really harrowing story about a mum fighting for her son in the second half. And I won't spoil it, but something that happens is a real just a devastating, helpless moment. And I think any of those moments where that's not a horror film, but it's it's a disturbing film. Anything where you can kind of go, oh God, to be in that situation, I can't fully process that emotion. So seeing anyone really suffering, or anyone dealing with extreme trauma, or anything extremely uncomfortable, anything very claustrophobic or intense, I find disturbing. Whereas a lot of these, I quite often talk about disturbing movies, and I think there are images and things that are inherently disturbing, and you go, oh, someone covered in shit is horrible, or someone puking for 10 minutes is horrible, or someone being, whatever, having horrible things done to them. They are disturbing, but you kind of, you take a distance from it because you go, oh, it's cinematic effect, or it's whatever, props or Nutella. But there are some things where you just go, this is something that would happen in real life, and this makes me feel horrible. Salò, the 120 Days of Sodom, one of the most horrible films because it feels so real and gritty, and there are rich, horrible people doing horrible things around the world, and 50 years later it still feels relevant. So there are things like that where you go, this is so messed up and horrible that you just feel what it would be like to be in that position. So films like that, where they're based in truth, and films like Threads as well, which is what would happen if a nuclear fallout happened in Britain, and that's still a present threat, that watching it now still feels chilling and horrible. So anything that's based in truth but takes it to the extreme is something that chills me. So yeah, I'm going to go with Dancer in the Dark.
Dancer in the Dark, wowzers. Okay, and then my last question is going to be, and we have talked about the danger of doing this, but if you could reboot or remake, hang on, now I'm inventing words. Jimmy's remooking. If you could reboot or remake any franchise or film, what would it be?
I quite like the fact that this is, someone else has already beaten me to it, but the Friday the 13th kind of reboot, I think, with A24, like going down a sort of arty route, or a more kind of indie route, that is really interesting, because we've had like the obvious remakes, but we've not had a horror remake that's kind of gone into the kind of older fashioned ways of storytelling. They tend to always go bigger and bigger budget, and so I'm not sure if that's a TV series or a film, but anyway, I think some of those classics that have had something more interesting done to them are, like, I haven't liked the Exorcist ones. I'm trying to think of classics. Texas Chainsaw's been done loads. Carrie's been done. Shining's kind of been done. Maybe like a film from my childhood. Well, those have all been done as well. It's a tricky one. I thought about this and I was like, I don't know if I want anything to... You know what? Maybe I'm going to say Phantasm. Do you know the 80s kind
Phantasm,
of quirky...
Yeah. I'm surprised they haven't done it.
Yeah, I'm going to say Phantasm. Cut that 10 minutes of me going,
Yes, Phantasm.
I'm going to say Phantasm because it's weird and it's quirky and it's funny. Not many people know it, so hardcore horror fans know it. But I feel like anything that's kind of got a slight weird edge to it is kind of open to interpretation, and I think that set in a modern world would be quite interesting, because we don't really get many fantasy horror films these days. Like, we get lots of big screen fantasy films, but that slightly weirder stuff that was only made in the 80s that now feels really cult. I think something like that. But yeah, remake the entire Phantasm franchise, please.
And you've got built-in merch, haven't you? The old ball with the spikes on. Yeah. Perfect. You know what? When I was prepping for the last film, I watched that. I think, how many are there? I watched 3 of them. I think
4, and I think I gave 5. Up. Maybe there was one that was there was one like a kind of return to Phantasm or whatever that was made in 2000 and something.
I didn't make it to that one, but the first one's actually got some really good, interesting camera shots in it. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool, and I wish I'd used them, but I never did. But yeah, Phantasm, good answer. I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you'd like to hear from more industry professionals, how they got into the business and how you can do the same, or you just want to listen to some cool stories from movie sets around the world, then please do subscribe to the Honest Filmmaker podcast.